Bojo and hello, I'm James and I'll be your host for this season of the Everyday Forum podcast, an original Stratfest at Home podcast showcasing a sampling of the thought-provoking discussions from the Stratford Festival's 2025 Meighen Forum, the festival within the festival designed to enhance and contextualize the performances in the main Stratford Festival season. The following discussion was recorded in front of a live audience in Lazaretus Hall at the Tom Patterson Theatre in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. Enjoy! Bonjour and good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's talk, The Woman's Voice with Patsy Rodenburg, and we're very honored to have Ms. Rodenburg here with us. This talk is titled after her most recent book, The Woman's Voice, which we describe in the description to this event as a call to arms for women to reclaim their voices. In that spirit, I'd like to begin today by recalling to mind the work done by the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, which produced its final report with truth from more than 2,380 family members, survivors of violence, and knowledge keepers shared over 2 years of hearings across this country. The final report from the inquiry paints a stark picture of the violence that Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people have faced and continue to face, and says in no uncertain terms that, quote, the steps to end and redress this genocide must be no less monumental than the combination of systems and actions that has worked to maintain colonial violence for generations. With that in mind, in acknowledging the land that we're on today as the traditional territory of the nations of the Neutral Confederacy and the Mississaugas and other Anishinaabe nations, I want to encourage all of you to learn more about the work of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and the work being done to amplify Indigenous women's voices, for instance, by the healing of the 7 generations in Waterloo Region and neighboring regions. So, welcome. I'm very grateful to see a fairly packed house, including our extra seats at the back there. Very nice. So, without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Janine Pearson here in her 36th season at the Stratford Festival, currently the director of the Birmingham Conservatory. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you. Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce Patsy Rodenburg, one of the world's most influential voice and text teachers. After her studies at the Central School, Patsy assisted Sis Berry at the RSC. She began a program at the National Theatre, and she was head of voice at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama for 42 years. In addition to serving those steadfast British institutions, she has taught all over the world, making meaningful connections between the practice of the actor's craft and practices from other cultures. Patsy began her long association with the Stratford Festival when she was invited by the artistic director John Hirsch to coach voice and text in the 1984 and 1985 seasons. During her tenure, she worked with founding company members like Douglas Campbell, Butch Blake, and Amelia Hall, with senior members of the company like Nicholas Pinnell, Dominique Blythe, and Brian Bedford, and those younger members of the company like Shauna McKenna, Colm Fior, Susan Coyne, Brent Carver, and Joe Ziegler. Over those 2 seasons, the festival programmed 9 Shakespeare productions, in addition to Waiting for Godot, Tartuffe, She Stoops to Conquer, and The Beau Stratagem. So, needless to say, she must have been busy. Since that initial invitation, Patsy has returned to the festival at least 6 times to give master classes and to inspire the work. She returns to us once again at the invitation of our beloved artistic director to challenge us and share in her exceptional craft. Please join me in welcoming Patsy Rodenburg. Patsy's been here since Monday, working with the company. But today we are meeting and discussing her most recent book, The Woman's Voice. So, as a jump start, as a place to jump off, give us some context. You've written many books: The Right to Speak, The Need for Words, The Actor Speaks, Speaking Shakespeare, The Second Circle, and now this, The Woman's Voice. Why this book now? Why did you write this book now?
I wasn't given a choice, actually, because At the beginning of COVID, I thought, well, I still got a book called The Bard in the Boardroom, because I've done a lot of work with world leaders, and I use Shakespeare to debate moral codes in power all over the world. And I was writing a book for the corporate world. And I settled down and I thought, well, I'll just sit here. And I can honestly say, and I don't really feel well, it's a bit odd, the ghosts of my mother and grandmother came into the room. And I just felt them there and I could see them almost. And they just said, write about us. And it was extraordinary. I'd never, of course, I carry them in me all the time, but of course I had to give them voice. And that bit of the writing was extraordinarily easy. It was like a muse coming in. I mean, as the Greek classical actors talked about, that the channel, great acting is often a channel of they believe that came in. And wasn't it interesting that in those times actors were considered healers and priests, but that's gone. The Romans ruined that one, but never mind. But so this, and then I had to go, the rest of the book was hell to write, because I had to face how ashamed I was about my inability to speak as a child, the struggle, the cruelty in voice teaching at some point, which of course you have to push away from yourself. But I also got into this thing that I've been worrying about for a long time, and I didn't want to talk about, but I had to. It seemed I had to talk about it, which was that I was an early feminist in the 70s, and we had such hope. I was so stupid. I'm a history nerd. My son always says, "Oh, you tell too much history." So, let me shout out, "Oh, she's telling more history." But I believed that this movement would be over in about 20 years. And then, of course, I woke up one day and thought, well, actually, if I had power for thousands of years, I wouldn't let go of it. So that was hard. And then I had to look at, my students sometimes say to me, what age do we live in? Because, we do the Renaissance. And I realized at the end of the 80s, we were entering something that I called the age of narcissism. And I saw it happen. And the effect on women leaders and women seeking power was that they were told that cosmetic power was more important than our voice and our breath. So you started to see power dressing as opposed to developing your voice. And women's voices, there's no blame here, began to fade. And I won't be let into America if any of you tell the Americans what I'm going to say. It's very clear with the president over there that you can have a very intelligent woman around you as long as they sound like an 8-year-old. An intelligent woman with their full voice, and listen to this word, womb, woman, it comes from, all our voices, every human voice comes from this powered by breath, from this very low place. And suddenly women's voices started to not be their full voice. And I had to struggle with that. I'm still struggling with it.
Do you think you could only write this book because of the age that you're at, in terms of looking back to your mother and your nan?
I didn't choose to write it. Those bits became joyous to write because nobody gave them voice. They didn't have voice. There were two very brilliant women. Both of them, my grandmother was a mining family in Northumberland, and the school teacher came and said to her father when she was about 12, she could be a teacher. I could train her to be she's very bright. The next day he bought her somebody bought her a pair of scissors, which I still have, and she was apprenticed the next day as a seamstress. And the same happened to my mother in a strange way. She came again from when my father saw where she had lived, he couldn't believe who he had married. Let's put it like that. She was in a council flat. She was brought up in a council flat in London. My grandfather was a professional Coldstream Guard. You know, I made the Queen, I'll tell you that story Monday, laugh because of a story about my grandfather. But she was living in one room without a bathroom or toilet and a curtain between her mother and father sleeping. But when she, just before the war, was offered a place at one of the greatest schools as a scholarship girl, Greyfriars School, amazing school, and she remembers that they said, "Where do you live?" And she described, and she said, "I saw their faces in horror." But she was offered a place, and then my grandfather said, "No, she can't go." So both those, but that's a very common story.
Mm-hmm. I think if you read the book, I know certainly when I did, I thought of my grandmothers and my mother and their journeys, and the shoulders that I get to stand on because of their work, because of what they did, and it is very humbling.
It's humbling.
Mm-hmm.
It's humbling to realize that. For me, I've worked with a lovely company called Shared Experience, run by Mike Alfreds, and I used to go and teach in this converted Soho laundry. And one day, my mother said, "What are you doing today?" And I said, "Where I was going." And she said, "Oh, your grandmother used to wash other people's knickers in that building." So I was doing Shakespeare in this, and underneath, this woman who I loved and wasn't treated well by my father at all, but she was a remarkable woman, and she held unconditional love with making me very resilient and not wanting me to lose something, I think.
Mm-hmm. So in how personal this book is, the thing I also found, it's also very hopeful because you're also teaching us or instructing us or calling us to the future of what women's voices can be and what it is to step into that. I mean, I have to say, when I was a young woman, I was at school in England. Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister. And we all, all of us in voice school at the time sort of made jokes about the fact that she had purposefully rid herself of her Northern English dialect and had lowered her speaking voice so that she would be in the room with men because it was predominantly men at that time.
Yes, I can give an insight into that one in a moment.
Yes, I'm sure you can. So, I mean, hopefully we are finished with that. Hopefully we don't feel that coming into our own vocal power now is to mimic men.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
But she didn't like women, you see. I was actually approached to teach her, and I wrote a letter back, which I don't know. I was very angry that she had taken milk away from children, but she'd also taken away every teacher in training had voice classes. And she took those away, you see. So I wrote a little note back saying, well, why do you want voice teaching if you've taken it away from the teachers? So I got a very interesting reply because I was then addressed as my husband's name. They had looked up so that the slight was, that I'm not Patsy Rodenburg, I was Mrs. John Roberts. So I was reduced, and that was the way it was done. But when I helped the Labour government getting in, and they had all these women in power, I helped them use their voices because they weren't used to. The House of Commons is very gladiatorial, and most women find that very difficult. But these women weren't from the upper classes. They were working class women, mostly. And if you go to a school like Eton, you're taught every day how to speak. You get lots of good speaking politicians, but they don't know anything. They sound great. my thing is the people who know stuff have to be able to communicate, you know. But, you know, Boris Johnson went to Eton and, you know, that he would speak to elders every day. He speaks very well if you meet him, and then you ask a question. He doesn't, in any case, that's neither. But the interesting geographic is that, what an amazing place you've got here. But when I started to teach these women, and these Labour women, there was only one woman's toilet in the House of Commons. And Thatcher deliberately only had one woman's toilet, apparently. Toilets outside, but where the politicians, there's only one woman was going to ever be there. Is that interesting? Little details like that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the quotes in the book, I'll just start at the very, very beginning. You said, by the age of 15, I had discovered the real enemy that had caged women's voices, a thing I loved and then hated in equal measure, Western civilization as handed to us by the ancient Greeks. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes, I've done a lot of classical plays, Greek, and I was shocked to realize that by the time we had democracy, women were kept inside. There were no women watching those plays. There were only men, except, as my dear friend Ruth Bedell, who's one of the leading classicists in the world, she said, well, there were a couple of women, and I don't have to get too crude. She said they were called the flute players. Use your imagination. But the women weren't there. But in the aristocracy, Sappho, they had that. But yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is, yes. I mean, and we see that, I mean, we're doing Shakespeare here, and we know that when his plays were being performed, they were not being performed with women. So, you know, that tradition has...
But the audience, that the writers were writing about amazing women because still the memory of women's power was in that society. Mm-hmm. How, you know? Mm-hmm. So I've spent a bit of time thinking about that and talking to people about it, and it's sort of right. Terrifying. We are terrifying.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel, again, I can use one instance or one example, but it's happened in every country. If we talk about politicians, we go back to Margaret Thatcher, but women running for office are held to a different standard than men, and often it is their voice that is discussed, or their hair, or their pantsuits, or whatever they're choosing to wear. But I mean, specifically their voice. I mean, I can think of, in the 1980s. Yeah, the 1980s in this country, there was a Liberal member of Parliament who was constantly berated for the sound of her voice. And again, if you could go back over some of those tapes and play some of the sounds of the men's voices, as a voice teacher, I could help them also. But why do you think it was specifically that is so grating on the ear? Lear says it, her voice was good because it was quiet and low.
Well, Hillary Clinton, I can't say much about this because I'm not allowed to, but let's put it like this. They put her in a corset. She was deemed too fat. So that's, so I go into anatomy. The good news, can I just say, if you just do a bit of work on your voice, you can improve it very quickly. Mm-hmm. It's not out of reach. There are things, everything in life is about choice. I'll come back to Hillary. I'll risk it saying what I have to say. I'll get my courage up. I have top women. I mean, it's so moving, it's not only women, but they come into the room and they say to me, I'm much more interesting than I sound. And that's generally true, but it's very hard to listen to somebody there for long because the voice is trapped in some way. But, women will say to me, I have to have my high heels. Now, let's talk about the anatomy of that. I can teach you to use your voice with high heels on, but But it's huge craft, and you have to work very hard. And I learnt that in the 70s from drag artists. I went to see drag shows with my, they were amazing. And I saw these men dancing at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern on a bar, and they were singing. Sometimes they were mic'd, but they were singing in high heels. And I said, how do you do that? Because women are finding this, and they showed me, basically. So I could put Geraldine McEwen on stage using her voice. But if you don't know about how to use your voice, if you think about it, if I'm standing, maybe I should get up now. Maybe I should show you. You see, the voice, is that all right? Are we all right here? Yeah? We have to, the voice starts with our connection to the floor. If you put your feet on the floor, over COVID, huge numbers of people lost their voices, and I'm connected to the Gray's Inn, so the judges would come and say, I've got a 4 hours summing up, and my voice is going. And I said, well, put your feet on the floor and you can get the breath down. If you're sitting like that in COVID. But if my feet are on the floor and I want to wear high heels, the only way is that I lock my knees and my breath stops. So then, this is the anatomy. This is a sort of knock-on effect, a domino effect, I call it. The next moment, I have to balance myself by holding up my upper chest. And if I hold up my upper chest, my larynx goes up and the voice goes up and doesn't come down again. So I can teach you to do it, but it's much harder. It's much harder, so it's cosmetic. And what I said about Hillary when this happened, take off her corset. Mm-hmm. And it was like I said, she can't breathe. Oh, but she's fat. Mind you, to be fair, I met Gore. I've met him and we did and he told me, he was such an amazing speaker when I met him. And I said, why did you look like a robot? I do say it, And he said, I know. He said, they didn't want me to have a wrinkly suit, so they pegged it all behind. And I said, but you couldn't breathe, you couldn't. So they did it to him as well, mm-hmm. But it's been done to women. Mm-hmm. I better get back.
No, so many constraints, though, for
constraints.
Any voice.
So, of course, there's I'm not a psychologist. All I do is embodiment and looking at what happens. And if anything happens that affects the breath, you lose your full power. If something happens that affects the voice, it starts in the breath and it lands in the throat. And then the throat squeezes and the voice gets thinner. Mm-hmm. And we all are born, good news, this is good news, the vast majority of people are born with the most amazing voice. Mm-hmm. And a powerful breath system. And fully present. And if we can return, if you're willing to do the work, you can shift your voice in a couple of weeks. It's not this, oh, I can't do it, Patsy, I can't. Well, you can. Just come and let's drop this, let's get the breath. So we're taking something back to our natural power as opposed to, I think, for a lot of women, their cosmetic power. And the other thing that we have to talk about, which is very painful, I find it very painful, but we just have to do it. I completely understand when we had no power, it is so important to be liked by people in power. It's so important to be, I sort of admire my mother because she was working class and she was thrown into the middle classes with my father. She never played the game. She said, I can't do it. I can't do it. But you have to be liked. You might have to flirt a bit too much. These are things but I understand that. But it's a choice. It's not you. I understand it because I've done it myself, As I have a penchant, which I'm a bit ashamed of now, of cars. I like a car. And when I was young, I used to maybe go a bit too fast through a few lights when they were changing. And I would be stopped by a policeman and I'd get out and say, oh, officer, I'm so sorry. Was I speeding? I didn't go out as I would teach an actor to go out and do, you know, a great role. Yes, officer? I played the game. I played the game, and sometimes we have to play the game. I mean, that's what we have to do, but do we really? You see, this is the hardest thing I'll say to women, and I'll just say it. If we want to be at the table of power, we can't expect sympathetic listeners.
Talk more about that. You speak about that in the book brilliantly.
You can't play games. The one thing that we mustn't do anymore, because look at the mess we're in, is we have to have transparency, and we can't play games. Mm-hmm. And so many, I mean, and I know I've taught some of the top women, and they'll tell me stories. So it is my experience to a certain extent. You know, working in the BBC, in the 80s, I did a lot of the famous BBC broadcasters. But getting into a lift at the BBC was a nightmare. And I used to think, should I just, oh God, he's in, I better not. So we've all had it. I think I write about my father, maybe a bit, I'm tough, because he was tough. It was a tough relationship.
But you obviously learned, and
Yes,
that
I learned
relationship
something.
formed.
He didn't like me. It was quite clear that I never backed down. I was a very tough little kid. And I never backed down. I should have backed down. My sister backed down. My brother backed down, but I didn't. And he expressed a couple of times in his life that he didn't like me. Now that was hard, but there's always, do you know, every curse has a gift and every gift has a curse. It is a kiss of death as a teacher if you want to be liked. He gave me a gift. If I'm teaching with a very powerful person, I still have to be transparent and say, oh God, these stories. I mean, 140,000 people this man ran, and it's a huge organization, Wall Street, all over, and he was top. And a beautifully dressed man, and he's doing a power presentation to the whole 140,000 people. And I won't say the logo because you'll get the company, but it's to do with passion. And he would just do his power, flicking over and looking and talking. And I said, you might as well give everyone an hour off. You're so boring. And he took it, and then he said, maybe that's my tactic, Patsy. Maybe, and I know people who use this tactic, maybe if I bore them enough, they won't ask me questions. It's a very famous director who I said it's to, you know, if you ask him a question, it's 40 minutes before you get to speak again. And I said, why do you do that? He said, it stops the actors speaking. This is strategy. Mm-hmm. I've gone off the mark, haven't I?
That's all right. You can go off the mark as many times as you'd like to.
The gift is that you just go in, you do the work, you don't play games.
So did the fact that you didn't feel that from your father, you were cut free from...
I was cut free
from trying to please him, or trying to make him proud, or...
Yes. But he also knew that... it sounds awful. Well, he also knew that I was good at something, and that made him slightly proud but slightly envious. I told him I got my OBE, and he said straight away, I should have had one. Mm-hmm. So that says it all. But I loved him, and at the end we did manage to... But I wouldn't give in. I don't know what... I was thinking about it the other day, walking along this lovely river here. I was thinking about, God, I must have been... My mother would try and put me in these pretty dresses with puffed sleeves and, and I wouldn't have it. I just didn't want it. There was something going on there. But I saw, I think, the cruelty to her and to my grandmother, who lived with us.
You are empathetic to your father in the book, where you do share that he had fought in the war,
Oh, absolutely. Look,
and
let's get this.
that was a time where we didn't talk
We have
about
to,
the
absolutely.
savages of that.
And when you kill your first man at 16, I think there might be an issue. He's Dutch resistance. And I did respect that, and he knew that I did. And I, of course, when you're young, I was horrified to hear that he shaved the heads of the women who collaborated. And then I thought, well, he said, I think he lived off tulip bulbs for 8 months. So, but I did. And in a way, we could meet on that. And that he knew in the end that I understood that.
Yes. You talk also about your husband, John, and what you learned from him, especially from him personally, but also with the group of people that he associated with. Because I think it's very systematic in the book. You speak about your grandmother, your mother, about these brilliant women who in some ways were not seen or who did not have voices. You speak about your father, who set you free from the need to be liked. Then you speak about your first really serious relationship with John, and what you learned from that, which I think is so important in terms of women coming to the table. Talk a little bit about John and how you came to be.
He was an extraordinary man. He was much older than me, and I think he didn't feel.
He had been your teacher.
Yes.
Which, of course, nowadays, that was a different time.
Yes, but but all I can say is I loved him and I looked after him until the end. I just couldn't. He was an alcoholic, so I couldn't live with that. I knew that I would probably die, but I never stopped loving him. He died in 2015, and I was with him all the way. Because I'm very old-fashioned. I made an oath. I sort of felt I should keep it, but I did love him, and it was an extraordinary piece of good luck, because I never knew who I was going to meet. He was I didn't know how established he was. I would find myself out, and he would never say who I was going to meet. In other words, I just had to sink or swim. And I think, oh my God, I think it's Tennessee Williams. I think I'll stay very quiet. They're all off their heads. I wasn't, because I was the driver. But I think I'll just stay, and I'd go home, and Ava Gardner was in the apartment. And I think, who's that woman watering my plants with vodka? Bizarre world. But I was allowed into a space where I could sit. And it was very moving for me here in 85, because a great person who I met, when I met him, Ronald Eyre, the director, he'd done this amazing television series, which is still considered one of the greatest documentaries on the religions of the world, called The Long Search. So when I met him, I was in complete awe. And I loved Ron. And it was here because I had to leave my husband because I couldn't survive it. I knew survival. And I thought Ron would, because he was a friend, also just to give you a sense of this man I was with, he was so funny that even Alan Bennett said to me once, nobody's ever made me laugh like John. So there was fun, there was wit, but it was very dangerous. But Ron
he was brilliant.
Yes, he was brilliant.
I mean, he was brilliant, yeah.
He was brilliant. But I thought Ron might have taken, when I left John, I thought maybe I would never have, and I was walking along here and he stopped a car, he got out and walked with me, and I thought, oh, I've joined the table as a professional, not just as a handmaiden, in a way. And it was here, so this is a very important. Canada's been amazing to me. It's an extraordinary generosity.
So you were listening, but you were also gathering so much about debate, about argument,
Yes. I learned
about how to bring your point forth.
not to speak, until I had something to say, which is very humbling, and maybe it's not the right way, but I did learn that. And those teachers, you know, all of those great teachers I come from pure theatre corps, you know, Grotowski, Lecoq, all of that. They were very, very cruel. And you can't teach like that. And Sue Lefton, who's a great movement person, we'll sometimes get on the phone together and we'll laugh and then cry at the things that were said to us, but we shouldn't do it back. But that's the way training was.
Yeah.
But John, every day of my life I think about something that he would have said, but I got access as a young person to people debating, yes.
And I think this is such a theme for every artist, is that your life, you know, your work becomes the summation of your life. Every experience that you have, you know, informs the work now that you do, the work that you've been called to do. I just want to read one passage here. Everything you are is connected to everything in the world and in yourself. Your full presence in the world, which is connected to you being present in yourself, is dependent on the full natural freedom and strength of your body, breath, and voice systems connecting to each other. You are in your full power and presence when you are connected to your whole self, body, mind, heart, and spirit connected, not divided and fragmented. So for the younger artists in the room, what would you say to them in terms of the work that they are doing, that they are involved in as it relates to that?
Well, you've got to practice it out aloud, everything.
And of course, we live in a culture now that's really obsessed with this little keyboard that we all carry in our pocket.
I think there were no books in my family house. I found an old battered poetry book. I never saw my father read. He read papers, the Financial Times. I never saw him read a book. My mother loved poetry, and she had a little poetry book, which I found and took, actually. And then Shakespeare, I found Shakespeare. I think one of the greatest things that I learnt, I got to Shakespeare before anyone told me I couldn't do it. Number one, because I was 9, and I didn't study it, I spoke it, and therefore I felt it. I felt it in my body. I could feel the rhythm, and even if I didn't understand it all, but I started, thank God, with Hamlet, because it starts, every child would love to hear this. Who's there? Wow. And then you read on a bit. It's a ghost. I mean, this is amazing, actually. No, I mean it. I told my story about my grandmother. Actually, can I tell that story in the book? Because I thought, you know, I used to go to her. She was always smoking, and she had one of those, you know, rocking, and she gave me so much, sewing, and I'd go and knock on the door. I was very frightened of her, but I knew that it was real love. And I remember her once saying that she never sweared in front of anyone else. Maybe she just knew that I would take it. I don't know. And she was sewing, and she looked at me and said, I hate bloody sewing. And co. And I thought, later, she did it from 12. And she was doing, and I think it was a message to me. I think maybe that
Don't
was...
do something you don't love.
Yeah, don't do something you don't love. But I thought I'd found Shakespeare. I thought, ooh, I'll go and tell her. So I went in and I said, I found Shakespeare, and she just rolled her eyes. And I said, oh, he's wonderful, you know. And then I started to quote some of the things he said, you know, all these wonderful quotes from Shakespeare. And after a while, she said, I don't think that's clever. And I said, what do you mean? He said all these amazing things. She said, no. We said them. He took them from us. And I was outraged, actually. But she was trying to stop me being pompous, but she was right. You know, all that knowledge he heard, you know. And so she kept me focused, and so I'd have to go in and find another one. And she said, "Yeah, we said that as well. It's slightly different." We, the working classes. And I got to Shakespeare before somebody said, "Oh, iambic pentameter," which is terrifying for some people. I mean, yeah, to me, it's the heartbeat, so
It's universal.
and it's the foot, it's the dance foot on the ground. So it is embodied, but it's made. I was saying yesterday, I sometimes teach Shakespeare to people, and I don't tell them that it's Shakespeare. And they say, "Oh, this is good." I've done a lot of work teaching in prisons, and I used to give them stuff, and they would go, "Oh, yeah, this is good. It's very good, yeah." Normally about murderers, of course.
You've done a lot of work in
Oh,
prisons.
God,
Do you
I've
want to
done-
just tell us a little?
Oh,
I know
dear
you
me.
don't talk too much about that in the book, but just tell us a little bit about
Well-
because everything that you talk about from your mother, your grandmother, your father, your husband, all of that prepared you for being.
I needed to make money. My father didn't want me to go to drama school, so he didn't pay, So I had to make my own money. I had to work, and I got a job very early when I got to Central in 2 top security prisons. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was money, and I went in, and I managed to cope. And then I started to give them Shakespeare, and then they got it. And then eventually I might say, "This is Shakespeare." "No, it's not. We don't do Shakespeare. We can't do it." "No, it's Shakespeare." It's not this. You've got to find the right pieces, of course, but they're there.
Was it shocking how much they could connect to some of the stories, to some of the moments?
Well, it is shocking, but it isn't, because these stories are, it's too used, isn't it, the word universal? Well, what I reckon is that there isn't a scene of Shakespeare which doesn't discuss power, misusing or not using it, or being complicit. There's not a scene of Shakespeare that doesn't discuss love. Is this conditional love, or is it unconditional love? There's many scenes in Shakespeare that talk about justice, divine justice. Is this divine justice or man-made justice? Is this a warrant? Can I kill Clarence? No, it's wrong. So that goes on all the time. And I suppose the other thing I was thinking about the other day is that there's moments that we have to forgive. He ends his life by saying that. And all those things, power, love, justice, forgiveness, I don't think there's any person on the planet that at some point won't be lying awake at night worrying about those things. And so when I go into communities all over the world, they get to Shakespeare. If I was to take Chekhov in, maybe I'd have to do 6 weeks history of Russia before. But this is an access. These people, of course. I went to Broadmoor, which is I didn't go. I went to teach at Broadmoor. Oh God, which is the prison for the criminally insane. And there was a wonderful man called Murray Cox, who said, "Do you know, when they make a breakthrough in therapy, it reminds me of Shakespeare." He said, "They speak iambic pentameter." I said, "You're joking." He said, "No, come down and see. Let's work." When they come, so when you do moments with them, he would say, "Do these scenes," and we would talk about them. They got it. Of course they did. How Shakespeare did it, I don't know. The other great jewel of Shakespeare, which is so important today, is that nobody is squeaky clean and nobody is completely not.
They're human.
They're human. He doesn't take the shortcuts. But we have to hear those debates to understand there's moments the person.
Because if we could
really-
understand that, perhaps the world would be less polarized at the moment.
Well, he had a polarized world.
Yes,
he
did.
lived through a
Yes, he
time.
did.
Well, he lived. Huge numbers of people were killed, but Protestants were killing Catholics, and then Catholics were killing Protestants. And nobody. That's what Measure for Measure's about. What are we doing to each other? So it's very relevant.
I want to take it back again just to women and leadership. You have a chapter in the book called Handmaidens. So before we think about Margaret Atwood's book and the series, but could you just explain a little bit about what you mean by that term and how you have seen that live out and what you are calling women to do in the presence of that?
Well, I think
What is a handmaiden?
I think I was a handmaiden to the director.
So explain that. What do you mean? You're coaching for a director. So how are you their handmaiden?
You do what they don't want to do or can't do. And often there's, again, Sue Lefton and I will talk about certain directors we work with, and you've studied this stuff and you've done 20 years of work on it, and the director will say, "Darling, just do that for me. I could do it, but I haven't got the time." Oh, darling Sue, greatest period dance person, that Galliard, you teach it, darling. I could do it, but I don't have the time. And that's what you see in the corporate world. You see these amazing women holding the whole of the business together, serving, and maybe you have to go through that for a bit. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, that's it. Cicely always said that a lot of voice teachers, I don't think this is necessarily true now, but were women because the male directors didn't want other men in the room. I don't know whether that's right. I don't fully feel that. But then there's a moment when you have to decide that you know enough not to be a handmaiden.
Well, I mean, I think that can be for coaches. Can be for, for young female directors trying to make their way
Yes.
in a world where still maybe predominantly we are male centered. I mean, it is a larger discussion. And when do you step forward into that and say, I can actually do that?
And it wasn't up for debate when I started.
No.
There was no debate about that. I mean, we started a debate about getting a female director at the RSC in the 80s. Juliet Stevens and Fiona Shaw, we all fought for that. Can we have a female director as opposed to assistants? But it's still there, really.
I mean, I've certainly witnessed that in my career at the Stratford Festival. When I came in 1990, I don't think there were any female directors. 1991, Martha Henry directing Enemy of the People at the Avon Theatre as a late opener. And she could come to do that because at that time she was the artistic director of the Grand Theatre. Shortly after that, I think the next year, Marty Meriden directing. But, I mean, we were coming to women doing those posts a decade after you were in England, for sure.
I also have to say that I shared for 17 years when I was at the National Theatre, my office with all the directors and writers, and I had to, I've learned to stand my ground, actually, and not agree. It's very hard, but a lot of the greatest actresses I know, I'm using it deliberately, actresses, some directors don't want in the room because they feel they're a nuisance. They're not a nuisance, but they're a woman's voice in the room. That still happens.
Yes, it does, for
I mean,
sure.
that's still, and you have to say, what are you talking about? So I've had my spats, and I think I had to know what I know, or before I could say, actually, I don't. I now have to stand my ground. I mean, I stood my ground with John Hirsch when I first met John Hirsch.
Yes, tell us a little bit about that relationship, which is quite wonderful because, of course, he was a survivor of a concentration camp. He came to Canada as a survivor, came to Winnipeg, and eventually, after an illustrious career building theaters, working at the CBC, he came to be the artistic director here.
Well, I was going to do my first warm-up for the company, and he met me in the corridor, and he was tall, and he was over me, and he was saying, "You tell the actors this, you tell the actors that, you do that to the actor, and you do that." And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't work like that." And he looked at me, and I said, "Come on." That's what I always do, actually. There's no mystery in the work. Come and watch it. There's nothing mysterious going on. It's just work. And he came in and he watched it and he said, okay. And that was it. We were through it. Because you have to stand up to what is perceived as a bully. You know,
But he deeply admired you.
I loved him.
Yeah.
I mean, we had our
Mutual respect.
yes, but there was a moment, I suppose, around my 30s. I thought, well, I must now stand up for things. You know, I'm not. It's very interesting. I mean, and then there's a secret. I was talking about secrets. You know, a lot of what happens in wrong leadership is that there's a group of people with secrets. You know, often sexual secrets. And I started to get very nervous when I was at the Guildhall because I started to hear or whispers of people in power saying, don't tell Patsy. And then I would knock on the door and I'd knock and what are you doing? Don't tell Patsy we're doing this. And it was always dubious.
Because they knew you would disagree.
Yes,
They knew that you would stand up for something.
Yes. Don't. And all the students would come to me and say, we've gone to the top people, but this is still happening. And I would say, okay, leave it with me. And I would change it. But it became that I was slowly, I think, pushed out because they sort of needed me. That sounds very arrogant because people came to train at the Guildhall because I was there, but they didn't tell me what was going on. You know, at some point I did realize that there was a whole system behind me, and I'm afraid led by women. I mean, the men were in charge, but the women were. That's another form of handmaiden, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
It's another form.
We are on a journey.
But I'm trying. You know, it's getting better in some ways. It feels terribly bad out there, but I find that young people that I'm working with now are much more. I have tremendous hope. And if we just are honest and transparent about needing to do the work, we mustn't fear AI because live theatre will always, as long as the actor's present and clear and open, that's going to be much more powerful. You know, I think we've had a phase when theatres tried to be, not necessarily here, but all over other places, like film and television. No, that's missing the point. The point is, it's live. So I always tell every actor, there's probably actors in the room that will have this story. You're standing waiting for a cup of coffee and somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, I saw you do that role 20 years ago. It's never left me. And that's what live theatre can do. It can meet, it can encounter humanity.
I would say overall in the book, the thing that I also appreciated was that it is a huge carrion call to women, but it is not against men. And I have to say,
I've always loved men.
Yes, I found that very refreshing.
No, I love men in the room. I mean, I was very angry as a feminist when we were told to hate men. I mean, God, that's just come back to me. I was St. James Church in Piccadilly, and a man called Robert Bly was speaking, Iron John, and I was there I met him and I was listening to him, and a whole lot of women came in and started to try and stop him speaking.
Oh.
And I stood up and I said, no, listen to him. He's not. I for whatever reason, I've worked with very tough kids all my life. I had something happen at the Guildhall. We're isolating men in a way that is very, very, well, we've seen it. But I just casually said, just after Brexit, I just said, well, I voted Remain, but I completely understand why people voted for Brexit. The whole room went quiet. And at the end of the class, 8 young, white, working-class boys stood around me and said, wow, we thought all the staff hated us and hated our parents. And I said, no, I've taught in Grimsby, this fishing village. I teach in these places. You know, it's nobody's explaining to you anything, and then you're vilified, you know? So we have to, and I have a son. We have to embrace.
Yes.
There's nothing, I think that's the really good thing. There's been a backlash, but more good men are appearing now.
Mm-hmm.
There are the good men appearing. Mm-hmm. And of course they've been good. But as I said, it's very hard to let go of years of habit. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. So I don't think we can't get out of this one without that union, really, I think.
Yeah. I know we're going to soon take questions from the audience, but I just want to read these 3 points that you write in the latter part of the book. It is a revolutionary act for a woman to demand time and space around themselves.
Oh, can I just stop? Women, why don't take the full breath? Rush.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Or you run on to do a keynote, and before you start, you get there, you start speaking, because we're so used to being interrupted that we have to. But actually, it's counterintuitive. But the more you slow down, the more you'll listen to. Sorry. I mean,
this is perfect. This is good. I hope you have something to say about the second point. It is a revolutionary act for a woman to take the time to take a breath and look at an audience before they begin. You were doing that work with the actors on the stage in the last couple of days about inviting them into the space and having them actually look at the audience and make that connection so that I see you, you see me, we see each other seeing each other. Talk about the power of that, because that really is presence.
That's it. You start by looking at an audience. Nothing happens until you show up. Every craftsperson knows it. Every mechanic, every carpenter. It's in our DNA. That's why there's hope. You don't understand nature until you're present with nature. And of course, presence, the conservation of nature is not only about the planet, which of course it is, but it's about our own presence, because nature is one of the forces that brings us to presence, as is art. I remember going to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, and I couldn't believe the light. I was about 12. I couldn't believe the way that Rembrandt lit with the paint, and I suddenly realised that brought me art and nature are what brings us to our presence. Mm-hmm. So
it's why we need the theatre.
That's why we need the theatre, but we also need. It's a funny little game I sometimes play with. Some of these are famous actors. You ask an actor who's been on stage for a bit to walk on stage, maybe in the Old Vic or somewhere, and they'll find centre. Ask a woman and she'll always be off centre. Mm-hmm. And then you have to say, I've said it to very great actors. Mm-hmm. Find centre. Oh, okay. I had a world-leading star, and I said, they've come to see you. Why aren't you centre? Oh. And then, of course, you love it. But I did a little test, come on stage, breathe the space, look, breathe, and they're off-centre. Mm-hmm. I find the same with ballet dancers, except the prima ones. And then they take it.
Third, it is a revolutionary act to slow down and not rush. So, women in the room, there's our direction moving forward. So now we're at the part of the morning where we got these wonderful cards of questions. So the first one is, I've heard you say that we are not safe in the room until everybody is present. Mm. What exactly does that mean?
We've all got to show up for each other. So I have a thing called the 3 circles of energy. I'll just, the little exercise with the group, the whole your audience, just flop back into your seat. The whole room changes. come forward and you'll see. It's community. What works well, I just remind anthropologists have told me that what gave us the planet was the ability to make a group. And the group has to work together. A Bushman told me when I was working with him in the Kalahari Desert, he said 3 young men or women around the age of 12 can deal with a lion. 1 can't. We're strategic in a group. So until everyone turns up, and there's a big misunderstanding, I don't think a space is ever fully safe. Let's get over it.
Talk about that.
Well, how can it be? It's the job of the teacher or the leader to try and keep it safe, but there's always going to be somebody that's...
Right.
There is no... It's a fluid thing. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a fluid thing. It doesn't require that you have to like each other. We can work together without liking each other. But we have to show up. I do it in theatre, but, you know, one of the reasons I get work in the corporate world is that I give them value. And one of the values apparently I give them is I say to the CEO and the board, everyone get into second circle presence before you do the board meeting. Put away your phones, look at each other, breathe. I will often say to the leader, get there before everyone else and just greet them as they come in, like a great lead actor does. Great lead actor, checks in with people as they come in. It's basically, I think my work sometimes is just about good manners. No, I mean, and good manners are everywhere, because this space between us when we're in second circle is when we are connected and we see each other. And I say to the board,
it's such an intimate thing.
It's intimate, but it's also huge. Mm-hmm. It's both, the paradox. So if you sit and you look at each other, and everyone should be there, should be prepared to speak. And they tell me that a meeting that normally takes an hour takes half an hour, because everyone is present. So they're saving time. That's why they employ me. They save a lot of time because and now I call this the golden 3. I'm doing this in schools, and I'm doing it in very tough schools because that's where I work. If every child, and we used to do it in assembly, you see. That's part of what was going on in church communities, you know. You would turn up, be present in your body and breathe. It's better. We can teach this very simply, very quickly. You know? So we can do this. So the safe space, and it's full of... it has to also be a transparent space. What I mean by that, I'm very good at this now. I used not to be. Took a lot of work. As soon as someone pisses me off, and I think I learned this in prisons because, you know, I had to do it very carefully because they were very interesting, tough people. I would say, please don't do that. And then carry on and forget it. But the group gets relaxed and safer because they know that you know.
So that's a kind of leadership, really.
That's leadership.
That's leadership, what you're talking about.
They know. Mm-hmm. I was with 12-year-olds and at a very tough school in Manchester a while ago, and all the staff came to see me. You know, I think they wanted to see me not fail, but I had 40 kids. And there was a little boy standing beside me in a circle. And the first thing I did when I got there, which was very difficult to do, it was Remembrance Day. And they had a poem, and it was such a bad poem. The poppies are red, they're only been red. And I said, no, get me some Wilfred Owen. Get me something. Oh, they won't understand. I said, no, they won't understand it fully, but they'll understand something. I don't want to do this bad piece of work. I want Wilfred Owen. So they got it, and there was 40 kids there, and there was a little boy standing beside me, very tight. And there were 3 naughty boys. There's normally 3, you see, in a group. 24, there's normally 3 people that don't want the work to work. This is in the corporate world as well. I'll say to a leader, there are 3 people in your team that don't want you to work. Oh, no. And then they said, you're right, but because you can see it in their energy, you can see it. There's nothing mystical. It's nothing. It's just, but there were 3 boys mucking about, and immediately I said, you 3 over there, come over here. What's your name? Okay, fine, stay. And the little boy beside me went, she knows. So eventually I got them all speaking this poem, and it was really going well. And I said, do you want to go round and one person give a line each, and, or a couple of words? And then he pulled my jacket and he said, I don't want to do it. I said, okay, you don't have to do it. So we did it, and it was fun. And then he tugged my sleeve again and he said, can I do a whole verse on my own? And I said, yes, Charlie wants to do it. And okay, so we're going to do that up to that moment, and then he's going to take over. And I looked around the staff sitting, and the principal was crying because he spoke that poem. And they said, we've never heard him speak. And the only reason he could speak is that he knew that I knew those 3 were the ones that would cause. And whenever I go back into that school, and they're now 15-year-olds, they will quote me that poem. They can learn it by speaking it, not studying it, by speaking it out aloud.
Next question. In Canada this summer and last, northern forest fires have made us aware of how climate change is affecting our breathing and our voices. How can we in dark times work through bad air quality so that climate change does not literally and metaphorically become the great silencer of our voices at this time? That does need to be.
I can't answer.
I know, but it does need to be said aloud.
I had it first in the 90s in Delhi, New Delhi. I was teaching there, and the pollution was so great that
and in Beijing,
yes,
places like that. Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't. I don't. It's so scary. Well, maybe at least we can know what we have to fight. I don't know. I mean, it's such a.
We have to have hope.
We have to have hope. I do a lot of work on conservation in some ways. I'm amazed how many people are working on it that nobody knows about. Some of the very, very wealthy people I teach, and a couple of them, they became billionaires, they say, because I taught them how to communicate and speak, and they all are doing amazing work, but they don't want people to know. So there are people working, and people, at least when I was young, I was terrified that my father thought I was an anarchist because I was a member of Friends of the Earth. And I did actually tell King Charles, because he likes Shakespeare, I know a bit. I said to him, do you know that in 1970, you went on television and talked about trees having feelings and connection and how important conservation is, and that saved my life because nobody had said it in a public way.
And he was so mocked at the time for doing that. Yeah.
He was so mocked, and whatever you feel about that, he did. But people, we have to encourage people, and I do know that there are people who are working very hard on things. Mm-hmm. My brother, who is a very eminent physicist, has invented things that have, saved people. I mean, massive. He's density of matter. He says to me, do you know that most of the problems are already, they know how to solve, but the patents have been bought up. The patents, we know my uncle, Dutch uncle, was he was an chemical engineer at Philips, and he told us in 1958, I remember sitting there young, and I didn't know what he was saying, but he said, we can make the everlasting light bulb now. The patents. My brother says, just go and find out where the patents are, because we have so much knowledge that could do stuff. So I don't know how. The breath, whether we dare breathe anymore. That's.
Next question. Many training schools in Canada are cutting Shakespeare from their programs. Thoughts, especially as it relates to female students. But that's for everyone. Shakespeare's being cut from curriculums in high school. Shakespeare's not being taught at theater schools. Do you have any thoughts about, I mean, you're traveling all over the world, and it's interesting wherever you go, sometimes you're doing Shakespeare. So, I mean, it's an interesting...
I think he works, and I can see why people find it difficult. I know all the, I don't know them all. I know that Nelson Mandela read Shakespeare every day. I know that Maya Angelou, when she read Shakespeare, she said, I thought he was a
black girl. You quote that in your book.
I know that if we get rid of the academia, it sometimes enters us. I would put a challenge to people, and I've done this a couple of times. Come and watch what we do. It's nothing mysterious, and it's just about breathing and embodying something. And this is the really hard bit. I think a lot of leaders since the 80s have come from never having done the work that they lead. I'm doing some work in the National Health Service. You know, most of the consultants and the great surgeons are appalled that they're being led by people who know nothing about medicine.
Right.
So, you know, I have a thing about politics. I don't get on it, you know, but isn't it annoying that most politicians now have never had a job? In Britain, they do PPE at Oxford and Cambridge, and they go straight into politics. They've never had to, you know, not that that's a huge exaggeration, but it isn't. I'm around the House of Commons, and you say, when did you work outside politics? Have you ever, you know, I always pay people. I always pay people because, you know, I had no money and I was teaching people and it was nothing. They were paying me nothing. And then they'd say to me, can I pay you next week? Okay. Oh no, I need that £3. You know, I think that sort of humanity of it. But Shakespeare, I would also ask the leaders who say, have you ever tried Shakespeare? Have they ever really done it? Not read it, but done it. Because the magic only happens when you encounter that language and that idea and that rhythm. I said it to a leader recently who was destroying it, and she said, well, and I said, no, do you want to come and just do a sonnet with me to see? Because I think of course I think it's important, because I think the compassion and the exactness, it's the exactness. This man knew the exact detail. You know, it breaks your heart when you realize that Hamlet, when he talks about his mother's shoes, the detail of knowing that she's wearing the same shoes at the wedding that she wore at the funeral. His brilliance is that he knows how the human mind and spirit fuses with detail. You know, that's his brilliance, the exactness. And that's not academic. I think it's quite useful to know that he didn't go to university and he was laughed at. He was laughed at. So, I don't know. I think that it's thawing a bit. Because young actors want to do it.
Yes, they do.
I haven't. Yes, I meet actors. Look, some people don't want to do it because you've got to do a bit of work. We're in the presence of an extraordinary mind, and so you've got to do a bit of work. I get
to
hoisted.
meet it, to come to
I
it.
get hoisted. I say anyone can do it, and then in comes the counter argument. Yes, but you've got to work. You know, so it's like, you know, you can't interpret something until you know what's there. The sadness in my life, I love Bach, but I can't play anything to ever interpret it. You can't begin to interpret something until you can meet it and connect to it, and you know, and that's not hard. It's not hard, but it's repetitive. it's
not the most glamorous work.
It's repetitive. It's like but that's a carpenter. That's,
Yes.
you have to admire people that, their brilliance is the brilliance of an actor is the doing, not the academia. It's the doing. It's like this research I've been working on, several people, these dry walls in London, around England, these dry walls, 600-700 years, some of them, and they stay up for ages, and all the physicists that have been looking at these walls say that this is a genius who can build this wall. They can't do an equation, but they know density of matter, weight distribution, shape. To build that wall
That
takes
stands for hundreds of years, yeah.
as you would have a doctorate in physics, and that's the same as an actor. The actor doing that work and moving is doing something that I love academics, there's nothing wrong, but we do something else. We meet something.
And we'll talk a little bit about that on Sunday when we talk on the training panel of where does the work fit with the academy? Does it still have a place in the academy? Is the academy dictating what the work could or should be? Because that repetition of the work takes time. Malcolm Gladwell, talked about it in his book, The Outliers. It takes 10,000 hours. If you're going to have a class, like say a voice class, twice a week for 3 hours for a maximum of 11-week term, you have a long way to go to get to the 10,000 hours.
I don't entirely agree, you see.
Okay.
I think if you want to work, you can. What we have to do, if you get somebody who knows how to work, the other thing about craft, it's a transferable skill. You teach a craft to somebody, they can transfer it anywhere.
Yes.
And that's really, but I just, people they shock me. I had a lovely student. He's doing so well at the moment. He's so great, but he always teases me because he was a refugee from Afghanistan. He came on a truck, actually, with his mother. And the first day, he saw me looking at his feet. He said, yes, they're a bit of a mess, aren't they? Crunched up, 19-year-old with feet that are completely. And I said, yeah. He said, well, it's because we didn't have any shoes. And sometimes my mum got shoes that were too big, so I had to grip. And sometimes she got shoes that were too small, so they were squashed. And I said, well, look, I'll give you this exercise on a tennis ball. You just try, and you've got to breathe and do that. I think it was 3 weeks later they were done. And I said, oh. He said, well, you told me to do the work, I'll do it. And he did it. I was expecting that to take 3 years.
Right.
And I said, did it? He said, yes, I just felt. And after a few goes, actually anyone doing it, after a few goes, you put your foot back and you feel the floor. And that's what he had to feel. So I don't know. I don't know if you work with somebody who has it. I do a lot of Olympians. I do a lot of the Olympic teams. They know how to work. So you say, you've got to change your breath here, that rowing. I do a lot of the rowers, They do it. So I think it's not. I think a lot of the training is now dedicated to inspire them to want to do it. And a lot of the training is they want to do television and film, they don't want to. So maybe at some point we have to filter people out who really want to be in front of a live audience, which is incredibly wonderful and difficult. Incredibly wonderful and difficult. And they want to do theatre. Maybe we're just doing too much. Maybe there's so many things now that at some point, do you really want to do theatre? I'm at the RSC, I'm having this, I'm taking on a role there. It hasn't been announced yet, but I'm going to put it back at the centre of the RSC. But, you get soap opera stars wanting to do that to tick a box. I've been at the RSC. I don't think we should have those people. Unless you want to do it. Oh, I don't like Shakespeare, but my agent said I should do it. I think that's... I don't want live theatre. That's... Why not just say, do you want to do it? Do you want to get this right? Because it's not... I keep on saying this. I talk about we have to do the simple things in life before we do the profound. Do the simple and it gets there. It's not hard. It's not hard. But it takes resilience. There's another word you have to teach.
As a woman, how do I prepare for those moments when I will need to use my voice in a room full of male voices that don't want to listen to mine? Buy the book, first of all. Just buy this book.
What we don't do is prepare enough aloud. I was lucky enough, I taught a lady called Lady Mary Soames, who was Churchill's favourite daughter. And he went everywhere. So I had a ball with her. She was a very close friend in the end. And she was terrified of speaking. Her father was a great speaker. So we worked, and you had to get her in a body. And then she'd say, Papa would walk around speaking out aloud those great speeches. Speaking them out aloud. And we think that communication is in our head, but it's in our heart and our body. We've got
in
to
our
breathe.
mouths.
We've got to get it out. I don't think, again, if you go to Eton and those posh schools, they know to do that. They do it. They don't get up in front of a group without practicing aloud. I can give you some really cheap tricks.
It's a different definition of privilege,
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Do you know when you have had that support,
Yes.
that work, that encouragement
You speak
to
to
do that?
elders.
Yeah.
You go
You
every day.
debate.
You have no fear of speaking to so and so, so and so, so and so. That's what they teach them. But I think you can make sure that I tell you what happens when we get really nervous. You know this. Just all do a little exercise. Imagine the person you hate walking into the room. What happens? You stop breathing. And the shoulders. So you have to start to really let go of the shoulders. You have to feel the floor. You have to try and breathe. A cheap trick is that if you go to a wall and you push against the wall, one foot in front of the other, gently, without tightening the shoulders, keeping the elbows released, and you breathe, you re-engage your lower breath. My son was going for work, and he said, he was, because he's not really, well, I don't know whether he's interested in what I do or not. He said, good health and safety. We spent the whole day lifting a box correctly. He said, it's exactly what you teach, I have to not tighten my shoulders, keep my spine up, and I lift up. Same when you push against a wall. Practice your speech. I get that with actors. I get them going, okay, I'm terrified of this speech. I'm going to just breathe put my hands and breathe. You introduce yourself. The first thing you do, and most people find the hardest, is to introduce themselves. Practice that. Practice. Most intelligent people don't want to talk about the things that they know too deeply. So they know who they are. So practice the introduction. I've learnt from actors that if you go on stage and you reach the audience and the audience thinks, oh good, they can do their job, i.e. I can hear them, they relax. They relax. So you go into that boardroom, you sit, you look around, you breathe. If you feel you're getting tight, you can push against the desk. Nobody will see you. You get your breath low and you've practiced. It won't come out verbatim, but you just know what you need to try and say. And then you can have little rules that you think to yourself, oh God, this is so hard. Okay. You've got to somehow get the courage, if somebody interrupts you, to say without anger, please don't interrupt me. By the time most people say it, they're so fed up, please don't interrupt, and they think you're hysterical. You just have to say, or I got good when I decided, one of the reasons when I decided not to be a handmaiden, one of the reasons, what I used to do is that, you would tell the director or one of your bosses a very good idea. And the next meeting, they were telling your idea as though it was yours. So the moment when I knew that I was coming out of being a handmaiden, I would say, yes, Tony, I told you that yesterday, didn't I? Right?
I know my heart just palpitates, just, you know. Yes, yes.
That was interesting what I discussed with you, wasn't it? I told you that. And so my other great thing that I say to all leaders, but women particularly, is speak sooner rather than later. Speak sooner rather than later. Breathe. If you feel that somebody's taking your breath away, you'll feel it come up here and here, and then it goes into the voice up here. Breathe low. Breathe low. I say that to my dentist. I say to my dentist, why don't you have breathe on the ceiling? And in fact, I must say to him now, have breathe low. And the drilling isn't as bad. It's not nice, but it's not as bad. So it's all that.
Great. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Patsy, for all your insights. Thank you, Janine. Thank you all for your attention. For now, we need to get Patsy to her table so she can be ready for you to sign books. So if you'll all join me in a round of applause, and we can get out of here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with the lively conversations and original performances on the Stratford Festival streaming service, Stratfest at Home. And for making it this far in the episode, enjoy 1 month for free. Visit stratfestathome.ca and enter code FREEMONTH. It takes you, our listeners, to make this possible. It also takes the support of our dear collaborators. Support for the Meighen Forum is generously provided by Kelly and Michael Meighen and the TR Meighen Family Foundation. Original score for the Everyday Forum podcast was provided by Hilary Adams. Production support is provided by the film production and distribution team at the Stratford Festival. That is coordinator Vilma Mancini and director Jenna McGaw. The Meighen Forum team is producing assistant Renata Hansen, associate coordinator James Hyatt, manager Gregory McLaughlin, and director Julie Miles. Special thanks to Mike Duncan, Greg Doherty, and Harper Charlton. Finally, thanks to artistic director Anthony Cimolino and executive director Anita Gaffney. From here in Stratford, Ontario, on the land of the Neutrals and the Anishinaabe, see you next time. Ba Ma Pi.